You know, we have to do better. Like Damon said, just because we have more blacks in power, we got to check those that we gotta put light on the situations like these too.
But
I think it's important that we're putting light on the situation. I have to say that my view is that this rather dangerous, the use of these dangerous police tactics has direct approval, if you will, from the mayor. And I want to give an example of how the mayor's own comments about policing philosophy in the city of Mount Vernon serve to perpetuate the idea that police officers need to have a almost totally unregulated hand in combating crime.
Sounds familiar.
I don't know if any of y'all saw this today, but I was listening to the show earlier when you were getting into when Damon was leading the discussion about so-called, I'll just call it retrograde mindset.
His big words. I'm going to bring a dictionary next time.
In policing, right? And just as
he used a lot of them big words.
Yeah.
He used them $100 words to pay for that education.
It had to be worth something, y'all. It's the only payoff is when I pull out a big dictionary out there. You know what I mean? Y'all will forgive me, but I also didn't want to use
the N-word.
Yeah, I little reluctant. But in any case,
Negro peons.
Yeah. So the mayor. Earlier today, I was, on Facebook while I was doing some work, and I saw a post from Mayor Richard Thomas, and I actually sent it to Black Westchester, and it says, it's a photo that the mayor ran on his Twitter account, and it says, "Dirtbag caught urinating in public. Be responsible. Find a bathroom." And many of the comments that were posted by the mayor's followers were approving, including the comment of one Jamie Pessin,
who's running for city council.
In
Mount Vernon.
Dirtbag? Wow.
And I was, and so I read through the rest of the mayor's comments. I was surprised, though, and, essentially my response is that apparently unbeknownst to the mayor and to his supporters, at least of that policy, is that this kind of vigorous enforcement of low-level quality of life crimes that don't do any substantive damage to the public is one of the real hallmarks of the so-called broken windows theory of policing. Now, anyone who knows about who has looked at the forces that drove mass incarceration here in the United States and the ballooning of the prison population over the past 3 decades is well aware of the historical connection between mass incarceration and the embrace of these kind of policies by big city mayors. And so I was a little astounded because Mayor Thomas continuously postures in various fora as if he is a progressive. He has appeared on BET, at least on 2 occasions, as the kind of spokesman of the new, younger generation of progressive leaders. And so I was somewhat astonished that the mayor would kind of mindlessly, in my judgment, parrot support for this kind of policy and use the rather disparaging description that he did of an African American.
Somebody called said a dirtbag. That's a bit much. It's certainly not appropriate, but calling him that is not cool either.
And could you imagine what they'd say behind closed doors?
I mean, this is part of the dehumanization of African American men.
His response was to the guy, "We have set a new standard for cleanliness in Mount Vernon. If we don't go after the low-level offenses, the culture won't change. Bottom line is, I don't see too much of this in White Plains parking lots or parks. And my expectation is for public places to be respected by all, even those who don't respect themselves. The city workforce is being held accountable. Ensure the stairways, parks, and public places are clean, and they will continue to feel a significant amount of pressure directly from top on down. The MTA did this when they fought graffiti on the subway cars in the 80s. We have the same task now to stop crime and grime all the time by making examples of dirtbags one at a time.
So
Wait.
He reiterated
So
dirtbags.
you know,
Dr.
so
Bob.
you could see where all this is.
So Dr. Bob, you're saying the term dirtbag, that's what you having the problem with?
No, forget. No, what I'm saying is I have a
No,
problem.
I want clarity,
No,
because I'm not
no,
sure.
No, what I'm saying is that
Hold on.
this kind of policing practice is at the very core of.
He doesn't remember the 80s. He's too young to remember the 80s when they did this. He's 6?
Yeah.
He
I
was
bet you he
born in
peed
the
against a
80s.
tree once in
he
his
was-
life.
I'm trying to go backwards a little bit, but I'm like,
He doesn't seem to remember the 90s.
88 would be 87 would be 30 years.
So 81?
Yeah, so
Give or
yeah.
take. 80?
Yeah, so he might. So he
80.
he was born in the 80s. So there's no way he was 5 and he remembers the cleanup on the subway.
He doesn't.
All right, I got it.
It's this
not trying to be-
mythologized view
I'm not trying to be funny.
conservative
but it's the
policing
same-
policies.
It's the same thing of Biggie talking about he was robbing people at the club that was out when he was
Yeah,
12.
12 years
Like
old.
there was no way Biggie was at this club at 12 robbing people when it was open. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying.
The more apt comparison is the Giuliani's administration
I'm about to say.
to impose its kind of its version of broken broken windows policy by cracking down on these quality of life crimes that are known to have been a mere pretext to further investigate their targets and maybe even incarcerate them and do permanent lasting damage. So I really think the mayor has an obligation to revisit the history of the various policies that he is advocating, both their strengths and their weaknesses. And I'm astounded that the mayor could, without any kind of hesitation or concern, endorse this policy as if it is a desirable one.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No discussion of mass incarceration in the United States
I have a couple of things to say.
can
but I'm
be
waiting.
separated from the very policies that the mayor would seem to like to bring to Mount Vernon.
All right, so if you call a man taking a whiz on wherever he was outside a dirtbag, what do you call those 4 officers that I was just talking about? That could have very willingly taken many people's lives.
You call them heroes because
You
we're
call them overtime.
uncritical of the behavior of police officers.
and
That's what
Brenda,
you call them.
Brenda wants you to know, and all y'all who have asked, retrograde is an adjective directed or moving backwards, a retrograde flow.
Love you, Brenda.
backwards,
She's a
reverse.
robot, I'm telling you.
A
Brenda.
degenerate person verb. And then there's more. When I read that, I couldn't help laughing. I
Yeah,
was
no,
laughing.
sorry.
I knew he was laughing at that. I saw it too.
I was like, you gotta, shout out to Brenda L. Crump. who,
Brenda, we appreciate it.
You're a genius, my dear. You're a
and
genius.
she's posted the story for the Bronx DA that I was talking about, and actually a story we did where the Mount Vernon PBA president, and I'm glad she posted that. Months ago, before this, and it may have only been, I can't say for sure, because they were fighting for their raise. The Mount Vernon PBA president, Gamble, voiced no confidence in the department's leadership. And I was going to say that's part of the problem when we have situations like this, is because of a lack of or inadequate leadership. We do not have a police commissioner. Since Robert Bob Kelly was fired in April, I believe, the beginning of April 2016. Since then, we've had several deputy commissioners who have acted as acting. The one being Fatigate, who then left, and then now Sean, what's his last name? Sean Harris.
Yeah.
Sean Harris, the brother. But we do
And
still,
deputy commissioners.
We still right. Both of them are deputy commissioners, but they're acting police commissioner.
Oh.
But there is no police
Official.
commissioner.
Official.
You know,
Really?
right.
No
That's what I'm
official
saying.
police
Like,
commissioner.
I
didn't
didn't.
know
We had Robert Kelly on the show, and we were very critical of him in the beginning. Very critical. He answered all our questions. He talked about the implementation. You know, your leadership, and then further than that, it goes to City Hall. But your leadership is the one that sets the ground. I mean, he goes. I'm sure he has his superiors, which would be the mayor, would have some influence on things that he wants done. But the police commissioner would then set forth the policies, the practices, put them in practice, discipline those that don't do it. You understand what I'm saying? Like, put things in practice. When you don't have leadership, it's like a child that doesn't have parents. A child can't teach himself. You understand what I'm saying? A child with no supervision is going to eventually get in trouble and get into mischief and just do a whole bunch of things because ain't nobody watching him. You know what I'm saying? That same child under great supervision would be a good kid. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, as bad as
And he'll pee on a tree.
Huh?
And he just might pee on a tree. I'm just saying.
Let me say this, because I think the premise which underlies both the mayor's advocacy of this policy and the broader policy itself is that somehow it is the deviant behavior of poor people that is largely responsible for the crisis of our cities. And I would take the contrary view. If we need to search out dirt bags amongst us, we need to search for the dirt bags in the highest places. Because I'm going to tell you, crime and grime exists in Mount Vernon, and it has long existed in Mount Vernon, not because of problems, not only because of problems at the bottom, but because of problems at the top. The mayor is known. Let me say straightforwardly.
There goes Damon.
Straightforwardly. The mayor is consorting with a man, Joe Spezio, who has personally been found guilty.
Leave Lorraine's friend alone.
Oh, no, wait.
Has personally been found guilty by tribunals in the state of Louisiana for unethical and dishonest business practices. He personally was found guilty. His carting company, as we all know, was also found guilty of violating federal labor laws in pursuance of its objective to break the union and therefore take away the bargaining power and the safeguards that unions provide to working class people in the United States of America. Moreover, I understand that Mr. Spezio also has Local 813, which represents the union, in court in order to do away with their pension or their health care. So, actually, it's people like Joe Spezio, who was described in the court rulings as a vulture capitalist, who have diminished the quality of life here in the United States and brought about the stagnation of wages over the past 30 or 40 years. And if the working people of Mount Vernon, not these sort of well-heeled elites like Richard Thomas, who are well-connected with greedy vulture capitalists like Joe Spezio, if the working people of Mount Vernon want to see an improvement in their living conditions, they have to insist that Mayor Thomas not search out for dirtbags who are urinating on the streets of Mount Vernon, but rather for dirtbags who are looking to swindle money from the city coffers. Let me be clear. Joseph Spezio is he owns a private equity firm. They lend out large amounts of money, and I was reading an article in the New York Times not too long ago, and it said that one of the new strategies that have been developed by private equity firms in their quest to, accumulate more and more profit is to get into municipal services industries, to find ways, and there's a very lengthy discussion of the, subterfuge, the tricks that these private equity firms have gone to in order to tap in to the immense amount of monies that are controlled by municipalities all across the nation. And we well know Joseph Spezio has been doing this all across the country. We've already discussed the reports about his activities in Opelousas, Florida, or some Opelika, Florida, which really was one of many activities that really scandalized the town and almost brought the city's finances to bankruptcy. And Joe was throwing around a lot of money. And my fear is, and I think this fear is well placed, that Joseph Spezio has the intention to do precisely the same in the city of Mount Vernon, as a matter of fact, as he's done in municipalities across Westchester, where he has used a lot of tactics, apparently, to gain a competitive advantage over his, competition in the karting business. And we've heard reports very damning.
That was a company called Competition.
No.
Yeah.
And it should be probably called Eliminate Competition. Karting.
If he was found guilty, legally he can still be deputy commissioner?
This is one of the questions that, many of us has raised, because the city does have certain ethical standards for both employment in city government and also in order to be eligible for
an appointment?
For licenses. And and the issue that I've been raising, and some others have raised as well, is whether or not Joseph Spezio's personal conviction by the Louisiana courts ought to disqualify him from holding a karting permit in the city of Mount Vernon, since the Mount Vernon statutes say that any business that has been found guilty of unethical and business practices is ineligible, should be ineligible.
But you said business, though, but he has several businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Was it this particular business that was named?
So.
Oh, I see what you're asking.
So I'm not sure which hauling operation, which company is licensed. Is it Competition that's licensed in the city of Mount Vernon?
No, RNS is in
RNS.
the city. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Competition
by that standard,
Competition is Yorktown, I believe.
Sure. Then, in my judgment, it's only my judgment, and people may be unpersuaded.
RNS also does
because RNS is
the Department of Corrections.
Oh, that's crazy, because RNS was found guilty. RNS was found guilty by a tribunal of the federal, the National Labor Relations Board for. How shall we put it? Illegal, maybe not quite. For activities that have been banned by the federal government.
I'm moving a little forward. We're coming to a short, but I'm moving. So if you, just for instance, and I don't know this, and anybody out there, please feel free to give me the information, call in, write in, whatever. So if, like you said, he was convicted of whatever, and then he gets the contract for, like, say, the Westchester County, the Department of Corrections. Who's that fall on? Astorino? Who's that fall on? Who's that? Who approves that? Like, where? Does the county legislators? Is the county executive?
Water contract and supply.
As y'all know, ultimately,
there's a solid waste commission, right? That's
right.
What they have.
We do have a solid waste.
You have a solid waste commission that's run by. That is,
right.
That same office that
is responsible for monitoring all all garbage hauling.
And I think Astorino's assistant or aide is on the commission.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well,
I don't think him and Astorino.
Only stops with the executive officer.
But I'm just saying though. I mean, and I understand that. And Astorino has a race coming up, and he's a nice guy, but you know, I think we could do better. But
I like Robert
Who, Astorino?
Yeah.
I mean, let's not forget, because you want me to tell you what? Well-heeled Americans make a concerted effort to point out any instance where a poor person has done something that's ethically questionable.
Yes.
So let's not skip over the fact that Robert Astorino's father,
yes,
Robert Astorino Sr., if I'm not mistaken, so-called Lieutenant Astorino, was found guilty of a major kind of violations of, you know, criminal law when him and Garcia and another detective,
Mount Vernon Police Department.
yeah, Mount Vernon Police, storied members of the Mount Vernon Police Department, by the way, who, for anyone who was hustling on the streets of the 90s, these figures were larger than life. And as it turned, and they had received congressional medals for the outstanding work that they had done in prosecuting America's war on drugs, only to be convicted before it was all over of themselves essentially stealing drug money from drug dealers.
Ooh.
It was like the Omar.
So-
it was the Omar of the Mount Vernon Police Department.
Mafia style.
So, you
I
know,
was just watching The Wire.
The Wire. That's a classic.
you know, when we actually look at the history of many of the figures who are part of the political establishment in Westchester County, we see that they have very close ties,
Well, I
very
mean,
close association with.
I wasn't even going back to as far.